All right, let's go to the Atlanta Falcons here. Falcons coming off a year where they were in contention for the division. Kirk Cousins ended up getting benched, and then it was Michael Penix Jr. taking over at quarterback. Falcons, finishing second in the division, almost made that run, and man, they made the most fascinating decision of the offseason last year. We love talking about these. We love the offseason time. Nobody gave us more fodder than the Falcons because they signed Kirk Cousins to the big free agent contract and then still drafted Michael Penix Jr. I mean, I had to reset my initial analysis on Kirk Cousins was great. You signed Kirk Cousins. Now you don't have to draft a QB at 8. You don't have to worry about the quarterback position, Falcons. It's great. All these QBs are going to go off the board. Just grab the best non-quarterback you can at 8. This is easy. And then they go get Michael Penix Jr. And I also defended that move to the end because I thought it was aggressive outside the box thinking and solving the quarterback position. And now in hindsight, it's like, man, it does look like the Penix move was right. The only thing you would reconsider is the initial signing of Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I think funny when you if you went back and replayed everyone, I think we had some of the least hysterical reactions to that whole Michael Penix Jr. draft pick versus anybody else out there, which has aged quite well given the way that whole thing has panned out. I do think that doesn't mean that everything they did was perfectly sound process. I think you can raise some questions about how did it not occur to you that Kirk Cousins might be this far gone, right? That would be the question that I would bring up essentially. It's one thing to sign him, but they gave him a lot of money. I mean, Kirk Cousins' contract is significant. Now, it's not as painful because Michael Penix Jr.'s contract is not particularly significant. So you can eat both of them, but it's not optimal, right? Like you would be looking at this and saying that made a ton of sense if you were projecting like 2 years of starting Kirk Cousins and then we transition to Michael Penix in the Jordan Love, Aaron Rodgers type of way. If you were told like, okay, but Penix is going to be starting before the end of this season, well, then you would be like, well, then that's then the Cousins contract is terrible. So that would be, I think, a valid question and a valid criticism is like, you didn't build any kind of out into that. It didn't seem to occur to you that he might be this far gone or this badly physically diminished. So it's not like it was perfect process, but the Michael Penix Jr. part of it, which is, I don't care that the rest of you guys think this guy is a fringe first round player or an early second round guy. We think he's worth a top 10 draft pick, even though we just signed a free agent to a good contract. That part so far, albeit very small sample size, looks dead on. I mean, they had the confidence in their own evaluation of the guy, and he certainly flashed and looked extremely talented in the last few weeks of the season.
Yeah, and my big take on it was essentially you could look at the investment in its totality and say as long as you come away with finding the quarterback, that's good. And yes, you lose a little bit of the rookie contract advantage because of what you have to pay Kirk Cousins, presumably in dead money. Again, by like the time you record this, who knows? Cousins could be, a trade worked out or released or whatever it might be, but I assume he's not going to be back. So you could say either the totality of the investment was worth it. We found our Michael Penix Jr. We found our next guy, or just the fact that it doesn't matter how you find a quarterback. You have to do it, right? I mean, we sat here on this show yesterday, pulling our hair out, trying to figure out what the Steelers should do. And I suggested draft 2 quarterbacks, post round 1. You be crazy aggressive in finding that next guy, because at the end of the day, you have to find the next guy. So process-wise, again, not perfect, but at the end of the day, they got a guy that they feel like they could build around. So that's where they are. And offensively, I don't think they need much. I mean, the only real starter we're talking about is center Drew Dahlman, who we've said, hey, that's one of the better centers on the market as far as free agency goes. If they could potentially bring him back, of course, that would be great. That keeps essentially the starting offense intact. And a lot of the 2 deep, right? You're talking about they've got the 2 running backs. They feel good about Drake London, Darnell Mooney, Ray McLeod as their starting receivers. There's probably some questions about Kyle Pitts heading into, the year 4 and what he is, and if there's actually trade value maybe for Kyle Pitts or someone else might want to unlock him. So maybe you need a tight end, but they've got 4 draft picks in Atlanta, and I feel like they're going to the defensive side of the ball where they had issues. They couldn't rush the passer, and several starters hitting free agency as well.
Yeah, don't worry about Kyle Pitts. It's the off season, which means it's Kyle Pitts propaganda season. Like we don't worry about Kyle Pitts till we actually get to the regular season and he starts disappointing every week. The off
Yeah.
season's all about Kyle Pitts is amazing. It's breakout season, baby. It's Michael Penix is the guy that's going to unlock Kyle Pitts. We're not going to be thinking about him as a weakness until we get to September again. Their biggest problem is, I mean, remember a year ago draft time, I don't think you would have found a more common pairing, outside of like number one overall, than Dallas Turner to the Atlanta Falcons, right? The Falcons were going to get their pick of the top edge rusher available. This was the worst pass rush in football, and they were going to get their pick of the best defender, the best pass rusher in the draft, and Dallas Turner was most people's edge number one. And they eschewed that to go and draft Michael Penix Jr., which was part of why everyone was so shocked. It's like this team is crying out for pass rush. All the pass rush was sitting there, and instead they go for backup QB that everyone thought was a second-round pick. It's terrible. But, like, that's what they left on the table. And, okay, they tried to, like, patch that back up later in the draft by just, like, throwing volume on the defensive line. And maybe Braylon Trice, coming back this year, basically didn't play last year, got injured. Rook Ororo, Brandon Dorless. These were three picks that came out of that draft that they were like, we left Dallas Turner on the table. Let's go get all of these guys to try and figure it out. None of them really made much of an impact year one. Maybe Trice will be the guy.
They were all hurt. Yeah, they were all hurt.
But maybe Trice in particular will be the guy that provides some of that year two. But like, again, you can't rely on that. Like, this is still a team crying out for impact pass rushers. So I would imagine that's where their first pick has to go.
Yeah, and fit-wise, I know I've said James Pierce for pretty much everybody, but when we were talking about Dallas Turner as a fit for Raheem Morris and the Falcons, we talked a lot about how Raheem Morris uses his edges a lot like Brian Flores, where they're going to drop into coverage, kind of old school 3-4 types of principles. And look, I'm not drafting an edge rusher for his coverage versatility. I want him to rush the passer and, set a hard edge first in the run game. But Jalon Walker for Georgia, when you talk about the type of versatility that he brings to the table, the 3-4 outside linebacker, classic type of player that can drop into coverage and add some versatility. I do like that fit for what Raheem Morris and the Atlanta defense has done historically. I mean, they were trying to scheme it up with Caden Ellis, their inside linebacker, some of the sim pressures and trying to free him up on blitzes just to create any kind of pressure last year. That could be a nice pairing with what Caden Ellis brings to the table, Jalon Walker, some of the versatility and the ability to, kind of manufacture some of that pass rush. I love that as a potential fit for the Falcons.
Jalon Walker, I think, would be an amazing fit for this defense. I don't know if he makes it this far. I mean, we're seeing mocks where he's getting taken by Carolina regularly in the top 10. So, he might be long gone by this point. But if Jalon Walker did make it to the Atlanta Falcons, I think that would be a run it into the podium type of selection.
Let me dream. Jalon Walker. So first round pick, like I said, they've got 4 picks. They have, from a draft capital value standpoint, it's the lowest in the NFL. Picks 15, 46, and then 116 and 243 for Atlanta. That, I mean, doesn't sound like much. I mean, it's 4 picks. So you can't address every need with that, but I'm thinking defense probably with those first couple picks. And that's not just in the front 7. They have issues in the secondary as well.
Let's say Jalon Walker is available. I mean, we said Minnesota's basically in the same boat, right? In terms of 4 draft picks, not very much draft capital. And we're like, because they pick much lower because they actually had that good season. They're down the back end of the first round. We're like, ideally, they want to be picking, 10, 15 spots lower down and pick up some extra draft picks. If Jalon Walker is available, though, at 15, do you pass him up to try and accumulate more draft picks? Or do you just take the guy that you think is a phenomenal fit in this defense?
I still would trade down. I think player fit is more fun than it is valuable. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think it's a fun discussion to say, I would love to see this player in that scheme because I think they would use him to the best of his ability. But that's not enough for me to say that's the best play. That's the best move. Like, I've said a lot. I think fit's overrated. So I'd love to see it. But if I'm the Falcons, I think there's just too many needs on the defensive side of the ball. If you could pick up another pick or two, I would try to do that.
I think my mind on this philosophically is changing over the last couple of years. I would have been in your boat and say, look, just trade down, maximize the percentages, get as many lottery tickets as you can get. And I don't think it's fit that's changing my mind, but I think the higher up the draft you get, the more the other side of that ledger becomes debatable, because it's not about the fit, it's about the quality of player I think that you think you're getting. So if you think that Jalon Walker is a blue chip prospect in this draft, right, which is a kind of, amorphous term that doesn't necessarily mean anything, but like if you think that he's genuinely a special talent, which also happens to fit perfectly within your defensive scheme, I think you can make the argument that nailing this guy, like getting one of the blue chips in the way that, the Texans did with Will Anderson and the Vikings think or hope they have with Dallas Turner, like getting that guy is more valuable than maximizing the sort of like the generic by the boxes numbers that the trade chart would say you're better off doing this time. Like getting the specific player that you believe has special talent is worth that.
Now, that part I buy into. If it's the right player, if the evaluation's strong enough, you know what I'm saying? If it's the right guy, you do it. I don't know if Jalon Walker's necessarily that guy. Love him as a player, love him as a fit. I don't know if he's that guy. So
this
anyway.
is like the Michael Penix Jr. thing, right? Like you would be saying, if now the consensus may have been way higher than that, but like the consensus board had Michael Penix Jr. way further down than that. And you're saying, look, if you just because you love a guy doesn't like that shouldn't necessarily you have to factor in that you're on an island with this, right? But ultimately it's more important of getting it right than it is, playing what everyone else thinks. So if you think Jalon Walker is your guy, maybe they like somebody else. But if you think Jalon Walker is your guy and he's available at 15 and somebody's offering you a trade to go down to, 29, that'll get you another couple of draft picks, but you miss out on him and you got to start looking around for the second tier of pass rushers, I'm taking Jalon Walker.
Yeah, I mean, that's all fine. I'm all good with that. I think as a general strategy with the Falcons, would love to see them accumulate more picks. I'll say that for every team that goes in with 2, 3, 4, 5 picks, whatever it might be.
But this is the one.
If you
this
can.
Is the chip, right? Like that's where that becomes slightly tricky for Minnesota, particularly where they're drafting. The history says, the data says, the difference between picking in the mid to late 20s and 39, 40 is negligible. The difference can be, I think, more significant when you're talking about this is a first half of the first round draft pick, and that's your big bargaining chip if you want more picks. Otherwise, use this one.
Yeah. The other places to take a look at, I thought process-wise, bringing in Justin Simmons, late last year as a starting safety was good from a process perspective, didn't necessarily pay off. Mike Hughes had a pretty nice season as cornerback 2 opposite A.J. Terrell. Those are other potential needs on the roster here. So need a corner. I thought they needed a corner last year at this time, and Hughes filled in pretty well, especially for a team that didn't have much pass rush, and the starting safety position. And so both need to be addressed. And so that could be some place to dabble in free agency with some of those top corners that we're talking about, the DJ Reeds of the world, and seeing if, getting a nice starting corner opposite AJ Terrell can help shore up that defense.
I think they could also use a big body inside. I mean, Eddie Goldman came back for them. This is a team that could use, independent of pass rush, independent of edge rushers, they could use a big body nose tackle from somewhere. Or
an undersized nose tackle type like Puna Ford, right? My Puna Ford, Levi Onwuzurike, your second tier of free agency for the interior defensive line. I like that group. BJ Hill maybe fits the bill if we're just talking free agents here.
To be fair, Puna Ford's got a pretty big body. It's just unconventionally distributed. I mean, Puna Ford is my height and outweighs me by about 140 pounds. So
stout.
It's a pretty big body.
Stout. I need some Puna Ford versus Willie Lampkin reps. Those are the types of, right? Those reps. Also draft Willie Lampkin. Actually, draft Willie Lampkin as your center. There we go.
Yeah.
Now we're talking. Willie.
Where is he on the consensus board?
160s or something like that.
What?
Let me send. All right. Let me just send him. We're going to do this live on
159.
air.
159.
Willie Lampkin.
Frankly, that's insulting. That's an insulting position for Willie to be. He didn't get an invite to the combine because the combine hates short people. It's discrimination. Is what we're dealing with here.
Where is he right now? Did you look it up?
159 on the consensus board.
Oh, I was close. Yeah, I think I saw it earlier today. So, yeah, that's messed up. I just told our friend maybe that's your new center. Maybe that's your guy. See what I can't reveal the answer, but we'll see. We'll see what he says.
Send him the picture of me and him standing next to each other. See if that helps or hurts his case.
He'll say pass. We're not spending one of our 4 picks on this guy that doesn't fit the profile.
This guy at Sam's height. I'm not drafting that.
Anyway, I mean, look, if Penix looked good down the stretch, right? I think he had some misses, but made some big time throws. Overall, I'd say far more positive than negative for Michael Penix Jr. I think they have a chance to be very explosive with Drake London, Darnell Mooney, the 2 running backs, a pretty good offensive line in year 2 in the system. It's going to be coming down to this defense. So we gave the Falcons all sorts of defensive options here to help the team. And then, part of it is all of last year's draft picks. They knew they needed D-line help, as you said. Braylon Trice, Ruka Rororo, Brandon Dorless, getting a full year out of those guys presumably should help the depth and maybe get this thing back on track.
And by the way, I'm not joking about draft Lampkin as your new center. I mean, if they
got
Jalon Walker in the first round, right? Didn't trade down, used 15 to get Jalon Walker, 46, you get a corner or you get, something else in there. And then with your 4th round draft pick, 117, which would be overdrafting Lampkin based off his consensus board. But like with a 4th round draft pick, if you were able to snag a guy who, with the greatest leverage advantage of any center in the league, is able to come in and be your starting center, I mean, dude, that's a steal.
It's not that they're running all zone scheme. He moves well. Aaron Brewer has held his own as a center for the Titans and the Dolphins. It's a similar type of size disadvantage. And dude, Lampkin is very good at just blocking people. That's what he does.
Remember, freak show. Like he's got a 6'6" wingspan. Like he's got like a body that's been crafted to be a leverage cheat code. He's 5'11", but he has a 6'6" wingspan. So you can't just like beat him for length because he's actually freaky long, but he's automatically 6 inches lower than the guy he's trying to block. Like it's perfect.
All right, man. Do we fix the Falcons?
Yeah.
Jalon Walker, Willie Lampkin. Unstoppable. We got this.
And we're taking whatever deal is available to get Kirk Cousins out of the building because nobody wants that guy.
I mean, that's one place.
Shoulder.
That's one place you're probably getting draft picks. By the way, in our previous shows, I don't think there's any team, QB needy team, where I was like, man, you got to get Kirk Cousins. May have even forgotten Daniel Jones as a potential option for like the Steelers and the Browns. But, those moves still potentially have to happen here as well.
I believe Jones to the Steelers was something that's been mentioned somewhere. I think based off the year Cousins just had, nobody's looking at him as a starter anymore. Not unless absent desperation.
To me, it's got to be a dome team. It's got to be, controlled situation as much as possible.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.